Chapter 6. AJ, this box is still sitting here, his mother called from the other side of his door the next Saturday afternoon, as Metallica blared through his speakers. With a sigh, he turned the stereo down and went to the door. His mother stood there, hands on hips and an angry face to match. I thought you were going to take this to Chelsea. I was going to get to it. When? Eventually. Well, let's just call now eventually. His mother kicked the box closer to his door. I'm busy. I'm sure. Look, I'm tired of tripping over this thing. Besides, it's not going to kill you to do one nice thing for your sister. As though he had never done a single nice thing for her in the past. He started back into the room. Fine, I'll do it in a little while. No, do it now so I can watch you and make sure you take it. Mom, he whined like a teenager. AJ, she whined back, drawing out each letter so that each was at least 4 syllables long. I am not arguing about this. Now hop to it. In exasperation, he bent and reached for the box. It was heavier than it looked, but the trips to work out for paramedic training had served him well. Clumsily, he hoisted the box to his shoulder and looked at his mother. Anything else? Yeah, I have a few dishes downstairs you can take too. He had to ask. Somehow Eve had never noticed how many things she actually owned until she started putting them into boxes. The movers had already taken most of the stuff the day before, although for some unknown reason they couldn't make the trip across town until Monday. Her plan, meager as it was to take her carload of stuff to the new apartment and then come back here for one more night's sleep on the floor. It wasn't a great plan, but at the moment she couldn't really see how any plan could get close to great. Carefully, she picked up the last box and set it on her hip. When she got to the door, her gaze betrayed her and took one more trip across the now empty space. It looked so sad. Dustin would understand. She knew that. But as she looked at the barren room, she wondered if she ever would. She didn't really watch as her hand reached for the knob. With the smallest of snaps, the door swung open, and she stepped out. Softly, she closed the door behind her and slipped out through the cold, drizzly day to her car. Not the best of days to move, if there was indeed a good day to move. She shoved the last box on top of all the others in the passenger's seat and ran around to squeeze herself under the steering wheel. Tomorrow, she would call Lisa and tell her. But somehow, even when Eve had talked to her friend earlier in the week, she hadn't had the courage to tell her. Twice the words had been right there to say, but they disappeared before they found the airwaves. They would understand, and yet Eve couldn't bear the sight of their reluctant faces helping her move. No, it was better like this, alone, by herself. Once it was done, she could put on that mask that said it was just time, and no one would have to see how the doing of it yanked the tears from her eyes at every turn. There was the coffee pot. Should she take it, or should she not? He was the only one who drank coffee, and yet it hadn't moved from the countertop in all the time he had been gone. There was the bedspread that they had picked out together, settling not on the one he liked or on the one she liked, but on the one they both didn't just hate. And then there was the closet full of his clothes, the one she had slowly but surely moved all of her clothes out of and relocated downstairs to the office closet. Somehow, it wasn't until she had swung the door open to unload the shelves that she remembered them. Slowly, she shook her head as she drove down the street to the freeway, but the vision of her sitting in the middle of the closet floor, holding his one pair of good brown shoes and sobbing, was going nowhere. They were just shoes, and his least favorite ones at that. Nonetheless, her tears hadn't really seen the need to get technical about it. All they saw was another piece of him that had been discarded along with everything else. When the people from Goodwill had come to pick up the items she had laid out for them, Eve couldn't watch. She had sat in her office, telling herself that the summer clothing line needed finalizing while the 2 men trekked up and down the stairs. Then one of them had come to tell her that they had everything, and would she like a receipt? A receipt, as though Dustin's whole life could be reduced to some writing on an insignificant piece of paper. "No, that's okay," she managed to say to the man, who nodded and tried to smile at her. She hated that smile. She saw it everywhere. As she pulled onto the freeway and picked up speed, Eve wished she never had to stop. Then maybe she could outrun those smiles and those sad, pity-filled looks that seemed to follow her every step. They said they understood, and yet they didn't. They couldn't. No one could. Hoisting the box to his shoulder again, AJ crossed the little parking lot of the La Paloma apartments. They were nice enough. Certainly nothing fancy, but nice. He pulled open the front door and crossed over to the stairs. At least today it was only one box. The last time it had been a couple hundred. How one person could accumulate so much junk in 26 years was beyond him. Even when he left for California, a suitcase and a few pillows was all he needed. But as his mother was fond of pointing out, Chelsea was not AJ. No, Chelsea was a woman now, and she needed to present herself in a certain way to the world. Apparently, that included having lots of her own things. AJ had little use for things. They tended to tie his life down too much. Freedom was much more important than having the right kind of DVD player. On the 3rd floor, he turned the corner to the left of the stairs, walked down the hallway, and reached for the door. 3 knocks, and he stepped back, waiting for the inevitable, "Who is it?" A moment, 2, and he knocked again. After 3 knocks, he realized that somehow he hadn't bothered to ask if Chelsea would in fact be home. He knocked again. "Chels, it's me, AJ. Open up." But his entreaty was met only with silence. Frustration poured over him as he reached up and knocked for the 5th time. It was at that moment that he first heard the noise on the stairs. "Oh no," the soft voice murmured. "No, no, 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 no. Oh, help." With no thought to the decision, AJ dropped the box from his shoulder to the floor and ran for the stairs. There, midway up, behind 3 unstable and sliding boxes, stood a figure half on one step, half on the next, fighting to keep control of the boxes lest they cascade right over the railing, but losing the battle badly. "Here." AJ descended the steps quickly and reached out for the top 2 boxes just before they had the chance to slide off into the abyss below. He didn't bother to ask. The soft plea was enough to tell him that his help was both needed and wanted. When the 2 boxes slipped from their precarious base into his hands, AJ smiled at the face they revealed. Long, slender nose, almond-shaped eyes, small, squared forehead under a mass of near-black hair that was secured to the top of her head, but falling down all around her face at the same time. A moment passed, and then recognition hit him like a punch. "Eve?" "AJ?" she asked, and her face dropped in shock. "What are you doing here?" The smile came easily. "Waiting for you, I guess." When her face fell in confusion, he laughed. "Trying to drop off a box of stuff for my dumb sister, who doesn't seem to be home." He jerked his head back to Chelsea's door. "But I thought the other sounded better." The sadness and fear etched in her eyes dissipated. "Huh. Well, I'm glad. For a minute there, I thought my stuff was a goner." He looked over the side of the railing dubiously. "Yeah, 3 flights down airborne, that might not have been a real good idea." Gently, he shook the boxes in his hands, "especially if there's something breakable in here." "Hey, careful with that," she said, jumping. "See? Not such a good idea to just toss it over the side." His smile slid onto his face as he made the slight motion of throwing the boxes overboard. "So where are these going anyway?" "End of the hall, right," Eve said, nodding in that direction. "But you can just set them at the top. I can get them." AJ pursed his lips together. "Seems to me it's only right, since I rescued them from certain destruction, that I carry them the rest of the way." She put her head down as if she might actually decline his offer. "Okay," she finally said softly. He swung the boxes up the steps in front of him. "Lead the way." Carefully, she stepped past him, and it wasn't until they were midway to her door that AJ's senses picked up on why she looked so different today. In gray warm-ups under a mud-brown cable-knit sweater that draped over her like a tent, she looked like a starving college student more than a fashion mogul. At her door, Eve fumbled with her keys for a moment and then released the lock and stepped inside. The space beyond resembled Chelsea's digs, except it had an airier feel to it. 2 huge windows spanned the wall to the right where the dining room was, or would be. Save for the 3 boxes they carried, the whole place was empty. "Nice," AJ said as he walked to the windows and looked out without bothering to put the boxes down. "Not much of a view, but I thought it would be good light for my drawing table," Eve said from behind him as she set her box on the floor. Then she straightened and watched him for a second. He turned, and the vulnerability evident in her stance and features touched his heart. "It's great." Then he remembered the boxes. Carefully, he lifted them as if to ask where to put them, and she jumped to life. "Oh, you can put those anywhere. Kitchen, living room, dining room. It doesn't matter." Nodding, he stepped by her into the living room. At one end stood a stone fireplace with bookshelves on either side of it. "Just over there is fine," Eve said, waving at the expanse of room. He slid the boxes onto the fireplace hearth and turned to her. "You just getting started?" One slender hand traced its way up her neck tensely. "Trying to. The movers are supposed to bring the big stuff on Monday, but I wanted to move some of the little things myself." Oh. Until that moment, it hadn't sunk in that she was the one moving, and suddenly he didn't know where to go from there. "So, do you have more downstairs, or what?" "Some," she hedged, "but I'm sure I can get it." Offhandedly, he shrugged. "What's a white knight for if they can't help carry a few boxes?" A small smile cracked through the melancholy of her features. "A white knight, huh?" It sounded good, didn't it? Her smile became a laugh. "Must be nice." "What's that?" "Having so much confidence in someone so insufferable." "Insufferable?" he asked, splaying his fingers across his chest. "Ah, that hurt." "Are you going to deny it?" she asked, and he liked the teasing in her tone. "I might." She crossed her arms in front of her. Oh boy, this could take a while. He swung the door open for her to exit. "Then, while I'm denying it, maybe we could go get something done." "Okay," she said, slipping past him and through the door. As they walked down the hall, Eve noticed how AJ mirrored the very cadence of her steps. With one finger, she pushed a stray strand of hair over her ear. "So, shouldn't you get your sister's box or something?" He shrugged. "I'm sure it'll be there when we get back." Eve leveled an unconvinced gaze on him. "Well, I'm not so sure about that." She spotted the little door off to the side of the stairs. "Hey, there's a mop closet. You could put the box in there until we get back." "Ah, it'll be fine." "Yeah, it will," she agreed, "in the closet. Now, come on. I'd feel terrible if her stuff got stolen because you were helping me." Slowly he sighed when it became apparent that she wasn't going to go down the stairs without first taking care of that box. "Okay." He walked to Chelsea's door, and with one jerk, he picked the box up. "Where's the closet?" "Right here." Eve opened the little door to a space that was empty. "The landlord said there used to be stuff in it, but they had to take it all out. Too many things conveniently disappeared." AJ vanished into the closet's darkness, and when he reemerged, he looked at her skeptically. "And this is a good place to put something so it won't get stolen?" Seeing the speed bump in that logic, she wrinkled her nose and then laughed. "Well, we'll get it out as soon as we get back. Then we can put it in my apartment." Slowly, he closed the door. "And this is better than just leaving it in the hallway?" She started for the stairs. "Oh, hush, it's better, and you know it." "I know no such thing," he protested. "And what I want to know is who's going to explain this to Chels when her clothes are gone." Eve shrugged as step for step they descended in rhythm. You are? Me? Well, she's your sister. Well, it was your brilliant idea. Yeah, and yours was a whole lot better. Sure, just leave it in the hallway. Nobody would ever think of taking anything from there. I hardly think grand theft would occur in the span of the 3 minutes it's going to take us to get back up here, he said. 3 minutes? She landed a skeptical glance on him. You sure don't underestimate yourself now, do you? Nothing to underestimate, he said with a teasing grin. Oh, you're awful. At the bottom, she pushed through the door and out into the parking lot. If I'm so awful, then why don't you just tell me to leave? I did, and look how much good it did me. Side by side, they strode to her car. You did not tell me to leave, he said as she unlocked the little silver door. I did too, she protested as she pulled a box from the car and put it in his outstretched hands. I told you that you could put those boxes at the top of the stairs and I'd get them. She handed him another box. That's not telling me to leave. Sure it is. No, it's not. Oh yeah? Then what is it? She asked, stacking one more box on top of the others and then reaching for the stack of pillows and blankets in the back seat. Okay, it kind of is, but you didn't say, AJ, you're in the way, I wish you would leave me alone. Oh, so that's the magic words? Eve asked as she kicked the door closed with the heel of her tennis shoe. I'm going to have to remember that one. Boy, you're nice, he said, turning to follow her back to the building. Did anyone ever tell you that? At the door, she turned and smiled brightly at him. I won Miss Congeniality in high school. Awkwardly, she tangled with the door, pulling and fighting to keep it open. Finally, on her yank, he reached a foot out to hold the door so she could slide around him and get inside. He shifted the boxes in his hands so he could see the stairs. Are you sure they didn't miscount or something? She looked back at him, climbing behind her. And now who's being nice? Just trying to keep up, he said, shifting the weight of the boxes again as they rounded a landing and started up the next flight. You do that, she said as she turned slightly in challenge. Just try to keep up. He glanced up the stairs looming above them. Like I have a choice. Up they climbed until at the top and down the hall, they all but fell into her apartment. AJ set the new boxes by the others on the fireplace. Eve simply dropped the pillows and blankets on the floor and pushed her hair, now damp on the roots, out of her eyes. You'd better go get that box, she said, resting her knuckles on her hips. Isn't there more to get? Yeah, but I've got to rest for a minute. Oh, his bravado turned in a heartbeat to unease. You can just bring it back here, she said with a shrug. It's not like I don't have the room. You sure? Yeah, no problem. Slowly, he stepped to the door. Okay, I'll be right back. I'll be here. When he slipped out the door, Eve sighed with a smile on the edges of it. He was totally insane. Reluctantly, she looked at the boxes on the fireplace and scratched her ear. Moving had to happen sooner or later, but suddenly, sooner seemed much sooner than she had figured on. Might as well get started, she said with a sigh. She stepped over to the first box and tore the tape off of it. As she did so, she smiled at the memory of AJ's dramatic rescue. Kidding aside, this box would certainly have been the one to take the 3 flights down airborne. It wasn't until she reached inside and pulled the top item out that her breath snagged and tears jumped to her eyes. The crystal rose had never looked so fragile. Her heart swelled as ache scratched over ache. Looking at the delicate petals, memories flooded back through her, and she wrapped the rose into her chest, knowing how close she had come to losing even it. Man, they need to rethink those corners, AJ said, bumping through the door with the box. They're impossible. She jumped at the noise and spun toward him, forgetting for a second too long the tears sliding down her cheeks. The second he looked at her, all humor left his face. The box slid to the floor without so much as a backward look. Her gaze dropped to the floor as she sniffed and fought every emotion she had stuffed down for months on top of months. In the next heartbeat, his arms were around her. However, nothing could stop the tears. They flowed from every crevice in her whole body, overwhelming every sense she thought she had until it felt like she might drown in them. Hurt that she had been pushing down for more than a year suddenly had no weight on top of it, and it sprang to the surface like an unleashed coil. Everything hurt. Head, body, heart, and soul. There was only throbbing pain. Tears slid down her cheeks and across her nose as she squeezed her eyes closed to stop them. But this army would not be thwarted. There were too many and had been held down too long. The sobs pulled up more sobs until she wasn't sure there would ever be a bottom to them. "Shh," AJ said softly, as the warmth of his arms melted into her. Illogically, in that moment, she just needed someone to hold on to, and one arm went around his back lest he tried to let her go. She gripped his shirt, crushing the soft jersey material in a clinch, knotting it, wrinkling it, and not really caring. In the safety of his embrace, the floodgates of her pain shattered, and all her mind could contemplate was how very bad she ached. It was then that she felt the palm of his hand rubbing slowly up and down her back, and she couldn't remember ever feeling anything so amazingly gentle. Her head, resting in the middle of the space between his chest and his shoulder, felt completely sheltered from all of the horrible feelings gushing through her. Slowly they subsided, although he never so much as moved to back away from her. Peacefully, his palm continued its slow, methodical motion up and down her back, until she thought she could just get lost in that movement. Exhaustion pulled at her, wrapping around her like the tentacles of a massive octopus. What she wanted to do was simply lay her head down and go to sleep. What she did instead was sniff back the tears and pull away from him. When she looked up into his soft golden bronze eyes, however, there was only concern gazing back at her. "Sorry," she said softly as she swiped at the tears. His smile, soft but sadness and worry tinged, touched her heart just as surely as his hand was touching her arm. His eyes were serene. No need to be sorry. Something tugged at her heart, pulling her gaze from his down to her hands. "It's just that," she beat back the tears that threatened again. "Dustin gave me this, and I don't know what to do with it." The tears threaded through her as slowly AJ's hand slid up and down her back, even though he was now standing next to her rather than in front of her. She could feel his gaze on her face, although she couldn't bring herself to look at him. "Then we've got to find an extra special place for it," he said gently. He held out his hand, and ever so carefully, she placed the rose in it. Once more, he rubbed across her back as he looked up to the mantel just above them. "I think this looks like the perfect place, don't you?" With great care, he set the fragile crystal in the center of the mantel and stepped back to her side as he slipped an arm around her shoulders. "See? Perfect." For a long moment, words failed her as the sight of the rose prominently displayed for all to see, blurred in front of her. "I miss him." Tenderly, AJ pulled her closer. "Nothing wrong with that. It just means you loved him." "I did," she said as the tears washed over her. "I loved him so much." AJ held her there, simply encircling her so she had a soft place to grieve. His heart hurt for her, for them. Life could be so utterly unfair at times. He wished he could do something more to ease her pain, but he also knew that to totally carve out the pain, the love would have to come with it. And so, he didn't even try to make her pain go away. Instead, he just created a safe place for her to feel it. After several moments, his gaze chanced up to the little rose, and it seemed to be looking down on her like a guardian angel from some realm beyond. AJ smiled at the thought. Yes, Dustin seemed to be watching over her in ways AJ couldn't explain. However, he felt them as if they were palpable. In that moment, as he gazed at the rose, he made a solemn promise to do his part to protect her in this realm if Dustin would simply agree to take care of her in the next. The pact was made in the silence of AJ's soul, but it could have been no more definite had Dustin been standing right there. Slowly, Eve moved back, and AJ looked at her. Serenity he had never seen in her eyes crossed through them. "Yeah?" he asked, knowing she would understand exactly what he meant, although he himself wasn't completely sure of the meaning. Softly she smiled. "Yeah." As the light faded from the gray-hued sky, Eve pulled an armload of clothes from the trunk of her car and handed them to AJ. Immediately, his gaze took in not only the stack in his arms, but also the pile still in the car. "What?" she asked, seeing the bewildered look on his face. "Are these all yours?" "Yeah." She grunted as she pulled an armload for herself out and slammed the trunk. "This is about half of them." "Half?" he gasped. He shifted the stack in his arms. "When do you wear them all?" She laughed as they started across the lot. "I don't really know." The bewildered look stayed with him all the way up the stairs. "I think you could have an outfit change every 5 minutes and not wear all of these in a year." "It's one of the hazards of the job," she said. "You've just got to have the newest, cutest outfit the second you see it." "Ugh, give me an old pair of jeans and a t-shirt, and I'm good to go." As they got to the 3rd floor, Eve looked at him in exasperation. "Comfort before fashion. Sounds like someone else I know." "Oh yeah? Who's that?" he asked, just as they reached her door. Instantly, her heart fell. How did she always manage to walk right into that trap? She unlocked the door and pushed into the apartment, hoping the noise would drown out her answer. "Dustin." "Huh. Good taste in women and in clothes? Smart man," AJ said without missing a beat. She looked at him in disbelief, and instantly he stopped so that he was standing, arms full of clothes, in the middle of her living room. "What?" Her disbelief melted into a smile. "Wait till you see the shoes." Skepticism descended on his face. "I don't think I want to." She laughed. "Smart man." It was his idea to order pizza, and they were halfway through unpacking the last box when the pizza arrived. AJ went to the door and retrieved the hot box. He paid quickly and brought his prize to the middle of her living room floor, smelling the hunger-inducing aroma with each step. "Don't you love the smell of Canadian bacon?" he asked, folding himself on her carpet like a 10-year-old with a new toy. "I wouldn't have known what it was, but it smells delicious." Leaving the box she was unpacking, she joined him on the floor as he laid the pizza box down and opened it. She picked up the 2 drinks he had set aside. "Mountain Dew or Pepsi?" she asked, holding the 2 cups up. "Pepsi," he said, pulling a stringy piece of pizza from the box. He laid it on a napkin and handed it to her as she exchanged pizza for Pepsi. "I am starving," she said as she put the drink between her legs and prepared to devour the pizza. "You are? I had a fruit pie for breakfast like 12 hours ago." He bit halfway into his slice of pizza and chewed heartily. Her hunger threw propriety out the window. Besides, it was just AJ. There was nobody she needed to impress. 3 bites were in her mouth by the time she came up for air. "Oh, man, that's good." "Told you." A couple more bites and he started to reach for another slice. However, he stopped, looked around, and then dragged the box and his cup over to the wall. There, he resumed scooping another piece out. Taking his lead, Eve scooted over by the fireplace and leaned on the hearth. Another 4 bites were in her mouth before she realized no one had said anything for a solid minute. "Okay, here's one," she said after she took a drink and swallowed the sweet but tart soft drink. "What's that?" he asked, still chewing. She gulped the piece in her mouth down. Pizza or hamburgers? Definitely pizza. Thick crust or thin? Thick. Stuffed crust or not? Not. He stopped for a minute and narrowed his eyes like he was trying to recall the detail of a crime. As long as it has a lot of cheese on the pizza itself. I'm with you there, she said, tipping her cup at him in emphasis. He took another bite. How about this one? TV or movies? Regular TV or like movies on TV? Regular TV. Movies. Definitely movies. Me too. I hate the stuff they have on TV these days. It's like the same old thing over and over again. Shoot-'em-up cop shows or stupid sitcoms with lots of laugh tracks and no point. Except for cartoons, of course. Oh, of course, she agreed, grinning. Although now they can even mess up cartoons. Give me Wile E. Coyote any day. The laugh jumped to her throat as she reached for another piece. You would really think he would figure out when to quit, wouldn't you? He's hilarious. All these dumb schemes, and they do the whole thing with 2 little sounds. Meep, meep. I like the signs he holds up. I like that rock trick that he has like 17 versions of, trying to drop this boulder thing on Roadrunner. Yeah, Eve said, and then half the time he's the one that ends up under that rock. AJ pulled another piece from the box. Did you ever see the one when Roadrunner is playing that dumb little piano thing and the coyote has it rigged to blow up on a certain note? She took a bite and shook her head. I don't think I've seen that one. It's so hilarious. There's this music sitting up on the piano and Roadrunner keeps playing through it, but at the end of it there's this one note that he keeps hitting wrong. Of course, that's the note that will blow the whole piano up. He plays it wrong like 3 or 4 times, and that last note is just so off. Then, finally, the coyote gets so fed up, he comes out to show him how to play it. And it blows up on him, she finished, nodding. I think I have seen that one. That just cracks me up every time. It's like, here, move out of the way and let me show you how it's really done. Then it just kabams everywhere. Oh man, how true is that, she said. No kidding. As soon as I think I'm going to show somebody how to do something, kabam! Never fails. You? Surely you've never made a mistake. A mistake? He leveled a get-serious gaze at her. Now who's underestimating me? Oh yeah? What's the biggest mistake you've ever made? His chewing slowed as he thought about the question. Then, as she watched him, the smile fell from his face. The times when I think if I would have done something different, somebody else might still be alive. He looked at the pizza in his hand as if it held no fascination for him. The ones you lose are really hard. Her heart softened toward him more than she'd expected as she gazed at him, suddenly so serious. That face that seemed in perpetual animation dropped away to reveal a despondency she hadn't known was even a part of him. Yeah, but I'm sure you save a bunch of them too. That's got to make you feel good. The gold of his eyes traced over her face. It never makes up for the ones you lose. Strange, she thought, as his gaze dropped from her face and he went back to his pizza. For the laid-back, just-have-fun, no-cares and no-worries attitude he usually exhibited, she had never so much as guessed this side was underneath all that. She retreated into her own world, and then wondered why she was so surprised. Compassion seemed as inherent to him as playfulness did. In a different light, she looked over at him, sensing things she had never known were there. You know, I bet the girls are all coming up with these life-threatening conditions just to get you to come over and save them. His seriousness fell into dubiousness. Ha! Yeah, right. They all take one look at me and run the other direction. Slowly, he stretched his legs out in front of him and crossed his ankles. Oh, now I don't believe that one for a minute, Eve said. Surely you've got some girl going into heart palpitations when you walk into a room? Like, what's her name? Melody. No, Melody and I decided long ago that friendship is as far as we want to go together. Of course, that doesn't stop her from trying to fix me up with everybody that happens to walk by." He reached for the last piece of pizza and held it up to her in offering. "You can have it." Eve wiped her mouth with a napkin and zeroed in on the previous topic. "So, does she have any particular body in mind?" Exasperated misery slipped onto his features. "Any girl with a pulse, I guess. The other night, she tried to fix me up with this chick that thought getting plastered together was a good way to get to know each other." "Ew, fun." "Yeah, tell me about it. And she wasn't the worst one either. Do the words star charts or table dancers tell you anything?" Eve's eyebrows raised on their own volition. Boy, Melody must have great taste. "Yeah, well, unfortunately, I'm not much better." "Oh, why's that?" Slowly, he shook his head. "It just seems like every girl I hook up with is either so batty I want to throttle her after 2 dates, or she has this thing about making me into someone I'm not. Ties, button-down shirts, frou-frou restaurants. Ugh, it's just not me." He took a bite. Eve smiled in understanding. "Pizza and Cheetos." He leveled an index finger at her. "There you go." Nonchalantly, she leaned back against the fireplace and looked around at the apartment. "Well, at least you get to go out once in a while. I have a feeling me and these 4 walls are going to get to be really good friends." His gaze traveled over to her quizzically. "What about Dante?" She sighed and looked down at her cup. "Dante's sweet, but it's like he wants the whole package, you know? Marriage, wife, kids, the white picket fence. I don't know if I'm up for that anymore." For a moment, AJ tucked his chin near his chest. Then he looked at her. "With him or with anyone?" With no need to hide, Eve looked at him, although she didn't have a good answer for that question. "I had it," she said softly. "The whole dream package. Well, without the picket fence and the kids. But it takes so long to build, and it can all be gone so quick. And then you're left with starting over." She shook her head so that the mop of hair waved across her face. "I just don't know if I can go through that again." "So you'd rather sit here and look at these 4, albeit very lovely taupe walls for the rest of your life?" She sighed. "It doesn't feel like I have a choice." Gently, he smiled at her. "You always have a choice. Now, whether you want to make that choice or let the choice make itself is your call." The weight of choices, made and unmade, descended on her shoulders. "Right now, I feel like I have made enough choices to last a lifetime. This whole moving thing is about all I can handle for a while." He sat in silence for a moment, then he looked around at the apartment. "I really can't believe Jeff isn't over here making sure you don't hurt your little finger carrying boxes that are too heavy." Eve ducked her head and pursed her lips. "He doesn't know." Instantly, AJ looked at her like he'd been sucker punched. "You didn't tell them you were moving?" She shrugged. "They would have just wanted to help." "Hello, they're your friends. That's what they're there for." Slowly, Eve shook her head. "Jeff has work, and Lisa with a baby and all. She shouldn't be carrying stuff upstairs. Besides, I didn't want to put him through that." "Through what?" AJ asked, although by the soft tone of his voice she knew he already knew the answer to that question. "Jeff had a really hard time when Dustin, being a fireman and all, it was really hard on him. I know he feels guilty sometimes for still being here when Dustin isn't. I can see it in his eyes. Today was going to be hard enough. I really didn't need them looking at me all scared and sad the whole day." "So you're just going to move and not tell them?" AJ asked seriously. Eve laughed. "Yeah, right. He'd probably hunt me down if I did that. No, I'll tell them, next week sometime when I'm unpacked and things get a little more settled." Once again, she looked around at the empty walls. "It's just so hard to believe this is home now. It feels like somebody else's place and I'm just going to crash here for a while." "Yeah, on the floor," he said, nodding at the heap of pillows across the way. She looked at her watch and sighed. Yeah, I was going to go back to the other place tonight, but I think I've about decided just to call this good. He mimicked her, and his eyes widened when he saw the face of his watch. Oh man, I didn't realize it was so late. He pulled up onto his heels as he threw the remnants of supper into the pizza box. She watched him, suddenly grateful that he hadn't just set the boxes down and left. His gaze chanced over to her and caught hers staring back. What? I thought today was going to be awful, she said, with barely a breath behind the words. But I think I lucked out when my white knight showed up. His smile was a fusion of the two sides of him, playfulness and compassion. Just be glad I had the good sense to wait around for you to show up. His words went right to her heart and spread the warmth of his smile throughout her. Trust me, I'm very glad. This has been White Knight, Book 2, The Courage Series, written by Staci Stallings, narrated by Becky Dowdy. Copyright 2012 by Staci Stallings. Production copyright 2014 by Staci Stallings.
Never miss a second of the story. Like and subscribe to the Staci Stallings YouTube channel today.